In some ways, we are wired the same way. I'm not throwing elbows into Jose Alvarado's chin. I'm not that type
bad
of guy.
Angle there.
I'm not nut punching Julius Hodge. I'm not doing that, but it's all love, CP.
JJ, I was counting. I think I have done you and Tommy's show 3 times. And this is your first time doing my show. You did an iteration of something for me.
Yes.
But I'm very happy that we are kind of switching a bit and you are here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for doing me the favor. But I was going to start somewhere totally different, but you're now telling me a story about Knox being a baller and you potentially coaching. Please repeat that story for the audience.
Yeah, so Knox, my oldest, did not care about basketball while I played, and then he got really obsessed over the last year. So he started doing once-a-week clinics in the spring, but then we signed him up for this rec league in September. The rec league, not the best competition, so we found him another team to play simultaneously with, and he's had a few games, and I went to the coach last week, and I said, hey, do you mind if I help out when I'm here? Obviously, I'm doing games and stuff, but when I'm here, I would love to help out. He's like, absolutely. So yesterday, I coached in my first game, and after the game, the coach called me and said, would you be the head coach? So I guess, I texted a bunch of my friends, and I was like, I got my first head coaching offer yesterday, and I accepted. It's an unpaid position. It's an unpaid position. But
So JJ, the head coach of what age group?
They're 8.
They are 8.
They're 8,
wow,
yeah.
real deal.
Yes.
This is going to be fun.
It's going to be awesome. I think teaching fundamentals is really important, obviously, but I think the teaching the fundamentals of what it means to be on a team at a young age, I don't think that gets stressed enough, and so that's something I'm going to focus on a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is also this might be your first, head coaching offer, but you very recently were asked about coaching somewhere else in Boston.
Yeah, I got randomly because I don't have a coaching agent, but I got some unsolicited coaching offers over this past off season, and the Boston thing just happened so quick. It was like a Thursday when the news broke. By Friday, I was talking to Brad, and by Sunday, I was playing golf with Joe.
Okay, we gotta set the table here because I love this story. So, what exactly did Brad say to you, and what exactly did Missoula say to you?
Well, I'm not gonna get into the exact details, but look, there was a situation where someone got suspended. Mm-hmm. I think it was 5 days before the start of training camp. So most coaches that are available already have a job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or their head coach that's taking time off, and Joe sort of sliding into that interim position. I think it was just a unique thing. I was going up to Boston, to be clear. That was already planned. I was going up to Boston.
Wink, I'm just kidding.
My friend Ryan Hergerter, he throws this backyard party every year with a food truck and a band, and I'd never been. Our kids are the same age, so I was going up there anyways, and anytime I take a trip, I try to get a round of golf in. So Austin, Danny's son, and I were going to play on Sunday morning, as it was, and then it just so happened that Joe ended up being the 4th.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't want to tell the exact details, that's fair. I can respect that. But why did you say no?
Life is about timing. I would love, I've talked briefly about this on my podcast, but I would love to coach at some point. I don't feel like the timing is right now. And speaking of timing, we're at the end of the round, we're having lunch, and I was like, Joe, by the way, when do I need to be in Boston? And for some reason, my brain hadn't quite grasped the fact that training camp was starting this week, that week. And so he's like, Tuesday, I need you there Tuesday for the first practice. And this was Sunday afternoon. And I'm like, all right, I don't know if I can swing this.
Yeah, but to be clear, it seems like these were conversations about when I'd be there, what it would look like. There was this part of you that did want to potentially.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't have, again, I told Brad and Joe this, I wasn't wasting anybody's time. It was something that I considered. Chelsea had been out of town that whole week prior, so she got back, and we had a long conversation Sunday night. And I think our family, it's more about like my family and my kids' age and what they're getting into. And, I mentioned to you, we're going through a renovation as well. Like
Lots going on.
I just signed contracts for the podcast and ESPN. And so there's just like the timings doesn't feel right at this particular moment. But hopefully in the near future, like that's hopefully something's going to happen. I would love to coach in the NBA.
What do you think is the thing about JJ Redick that would make you a good coach?
I don't necessarily think it's one thing, but I feel like I know the game pretty well. Yeah. I feel like because of some coaches I played for, really specifically Coach K, like he taught me about adaptability. And our game, the NBA, changes so fast year to year. You could be in an era and you think it's going to be a 10-year era, and it could be a year or two. And so just having the mindset of the mindset of just being open to change, I think that's really good. I think one of my greatest skills as a human being is my ability to communicate and communicate in an open and transparent way. And I did that as a teammate. And I think that's part of coaching, is just not avoiding things and not avoiding confrontation. Locker rooms, team chemistry, it's a very fragile thing. We see it all the time in the NBA. And the other part of it is like, I look at coaching as a way to help.
Yeah.
And, there's the competitive part of it for sure. That's a major driving force. But it's like I had so many people help me in my career, and not just head coaches, but assistant coaches, player development people. And they have such a valuable place in my heart and in my life. And I'd love to be one of those people someday.
Yeah. I mean, because you said it, so much of being a coach, it isn't just about like this in-game stuff. It's not about adjustments. It's about being a manager of people. I think that's what really makes great coaches great, how they were able to figure out this mesh of people and make it work. So when you look at the coaches you've had, who's been not the best coach, but just the best manager of individuals?
It's a great question. I think all my coaches did it well to a certain degree. They just did it in a very different way. Stan in particular was very direct with everyone. I mean, even early in my career, there was a little bit of this with me and him. And so I really appreciate that approach. Doc was great about motivating people. He's great with words. He's a great communicator. Brett had such a good soul and such a good heart. And so when he said something, you knew he meant it. And those were I think the coaches that I primarily spent the most time with as a player, and of course, Coach. I mean, he's the only person I call Coach, to be honest with you. But of course, Coach. I mean, he.
I feel like if you don't call him that, he hears you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine calling him by his first name. That wouldn't go down well.
In your whole life, you've never called him by his first name?
I never will. No, and I don't. Man, I'll like occasionally say, thanks, Coach, to someone else. But when I refer to people that are not in the room, it's like Brett and Doc and Stan.
Yeah.
And then it's Coach.
Yeah.
I mean, I called my high school coach Billy. Like, that was his name, Billy. I called him Billy. He's still Billy to me. A coach is Coach. How
do you become that? Like the coach? Why is he the one that you can't say his name?
It's, some of it is the level of respect, because I grew up a Duke fan, and it was still pinching myself when I would be in team meetings at Duke. It's still like, holy shit, this is actually real. This is not like my dream. I'm actually living this out. So the respect part is there. How he treated me, I always tell people, like, my dad is the greatest man that I've ever known, and my dad is up here. But then it's Coach. Like, he's the second figure in my life that has had an incredible impact and influence.
Really?
Yeah.
In what ways?
First of all, he showed me what it looked like to give people a second chance. He showed me what it looked like to forgive. Because honestly, like, I probably should have been either suspended or kicked off the team my sophomore year, and he wrapped his arms around me instead and put me on a plan. And that plan that summer changed the course of my life. It changed the course of my career. That's a big moment in your life. And so it's not that I feel indebted. It's just, it carries a lot of meaning and weight. And I'm grateful for that. The other thing is he makes time. He's incredibly busy. I was actually home for Thanksgiving. I was back in Raleigh. My parents and sisters lived there, and I had texted him earlier in the week, and I was like, hey, do you mind if I come over? I'd love to catch up. So I went over to his house on Saturday and sat in his living room. He's also got a puppy, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And,
we love puppies on the show.
I just got a puppy.
Very cute.
But, and just spending an hour and a half with him, it's just like he had a camp the day of my wedding, and he got a PJ out of his own pocket to fly down, stayed the whole time, danced with the grandmas, got back on the PJ, was back at camp the next morning. Like he just, and it's not just me that he's done this for. I've seen him do this for dozens and dozens of Duke players. So I think we all revere him.
Yeah.
We all revere him.
No, I remember seeing you and Jayson both talking about him, and you all were discussing these funny moments, right? But it was all about how is there this man that is so grand, right, but has all of these other things and other reasons why we love him. And it's all so personal. And so many of you guys have had a singular experience, which really speaks to who he is and what he has done for and to everyone, which is really beautiful.
I also, for me, going back to the coaching thing, I've taken something from every coach in some ways. And with Coach, I've taken a lot, but one of the things that always stood out to me was how invested he was, meaning I never saw him have a bad day. That's not to say he didn't, make mistakes. He's not a perfect person, but I never saw him come to work, come to practice, come to a game with the wrong mindset or the wrong attitude or the wrong energy. Like there was always such intent and enthusiasm for everything he was doing on every single day. I was around him every day for 4 years pretty much. Yeah. I never saw him have a bad day. And when I was a player, and certainly early on in my career trying to figure things out, I probably went through some things. But once I figured out the NBA, it was like that. I took great pride in that. Like, I'm going to come to work today, and I'm going to be super enthusiastic. I'm going to be a great teammate. I'm going to be engaging. I learned that from him.
Yeah, being solid. And I think there's something to being a person where everybody knows what they're going to get. Like, regardless of the day, I know what I'm going to get from this person. And those, I think, tend to be the people that can kind of draw you to them in different ways. Something you just mentioned, and I have heard you mention it a lot in podcasts and different articles, is this sophomore year at Duke and what it meant to your life. What did this year mean for you, the good and the bad?
Yeah, to sort of set the stage, I grew up a Duke fan, had wanted to go there my entire childhood, teenage years. So it was like a dream, and it came true. And then I get there, and it's way harder than I realized, and it's way more of a fishbowl than I realized. And then on top of that, there's the opposing team's fan bases that just hate me. And I just kind of felt like I was in this spiral. And I asked my sisters to drive over from Raleigh in December of my sophomore year. Told them I wanted to quit. Told them I wanted to just be a normal student. Actually, Paulo Banchero talked about this recently on a podcast where he felt like when he was on campus and he was a Duke basketball player, it just felt like everybody's eyes were on him. And it's weird because now, having played 15 years in the NBA, I realize it's not the case. But when you're in that moment, the Duke basketball experience feels so big. It feels so enormous. And so I kind of rebelled. I mean, I was living like a frat kid my sophomore year. And on the surface, whatever, I was third team All-American, second team All-ACC, leading scorer on a Final Four team. Like, I had a good season, but it wasn't right. And Coach said to me in a series of meetings after we lost to UConn in the Final Four, he made me come in like every Saturday during April at 8 a.m. And he said to me, we didn't win a national championship because you weren't worthy. And I wasn't prepared to hear that because it cut me so deep. So I spiraled even more. And it got to the point where I had not gone to class that semester either. So I had an incomplete that I had to finish. Summer school had started. I told my parents I was finishing the incomplete at Duke. I told Duke I was back in Roanoke finishing. Really, I was just hanging out at a buddy's apartment. And that's, I get here a pop, pop, pop on the door, and Wojo and Collins are there. They drag me to campus, and I go up to Coach's office. And that meeting, literally that moment, changed my life. And Coach Collins said something in that meeting that has really stuck with me. He said, the sad thing is we'll never know how good you could be. And the two of them, we were not champions because you were not worthy of being a champion. And the sad thing is we'll never know how good you can be. Those two things has stuck with me the rest of my career. Like you're not going to be able to say that about me. I'm going to work relentlessly. And the support system I had at Duke that summer, they put me on a plan. Like I still have a sheet printed out of, wake up time, check-in time, class time, workouts. I had 3 workouts a day, bedtime, when I would eat. And
the routine.
So and then I became known for the routine.
Yeah.
But it was because I didn't have a routine before that.
Because of that.
I was just making shit up.
Yeah. So how much of that hard time and how much of this kind of crisis within yourself about, being at Duke and figuring out who you are, how much of that was compounded by literally feeling like everyone hated you?
It was definitely compounded by it. It would have been hard no matter what. When you're 18 or 19, your ego structure, your sense of self, your security in self, it's just not there. And I had a really hard time with that. I wanted people to like me. That was important to me, like it is for almost any 18 or 19-year-old person. And so dealing with this, the things that were said about me, even just there was a sick sense of joy in going to an opposing arena and having everybody yell at you and then, having 25 points and winning the game. I kind of got off on it a little bit, but also then all of a sudden the high leaves you and you're left reflecting, and that's a question you can't answer. Why does everybody hate me?
Yeah.
I'm 18 years old. Why does it, and so that made it way worse than just the normal Duke experience.
And I mean, it really was. I remember articles talking about you being the worst person on earth. Mm-hmm. It was a big thing. Everybody wanted to not like JJ Redick. I assume now, because of who you are, you have gotten over it mostly. Are you fully over that moment in your life?
I'm over it. I mean, it's one of the reasons I can talk about it openly. Yeah. And I saw mental health professionals sophomore year on. I became very comfortable in that setting, and so I continue to do that throughout my NBA career at different points in time. I have no problem seeking help, and so I think it's that period, especially at Duke, is figuring out who I am and being comfortable with that. I can admit I'm an asshole. I'm a sarcastic prick, and that's okay. It doesn't make me a bad person.
Yeah. I know. It's funny because I'm okay, I wonder if JJ Redick now, how you would have felt about that JJ Redick at the time.
I would have hated that kid.
You're I hear you guys. I see it.
I get it.
I get it.
I get it. The head bobbing, the smiling, it was really annoying. Really annoying, I get it. I get it.
In a Vanity Fair article, you talked about just this arc that your career has gone. Just explain that arc to me, the points in that arc.
So I don't remember exactly what I said in that article, but I do remember telling Eve, who wrote the article, she was wonderful to talk to. I'm not comfortable with people saying, "Oh, I like JJ Redick now." That doesn't make me feel better or anything like that. I think it's sort of just wanting to keep an even keel with other people's perceptions of you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily view it in this arc, but the general thought is that when I first started playing at Duke, everybody hated me. Early in my NBA career, everybody hated me, and they loved that I was failing. Mm-hmm. And then I worked my way into the rotation. I gained people's respect. And then in the end, it turns out that I'm not so bad.
Yeah, it's like a movie.
Yeah, it is. Again, that's sort of the general sense I get from other people. But
how has your experience changed the way that you talk about other athletes? Because I'm sure there are times where you have this inkling of, okay, I kind of don't like this person, but you don't really know why.
Mm-hmm.
And you think maybe that's what people thought about me.
When I talk about athletes, there's sort of two ways to do that. You can talk about output, meaning what they're doing on the court, the productivity, how that fits into winning. That's fairly easy to talk about. The nuance of talking about the human, which is something that I think you do very well and something that we try to do on the podcast as well, I think that gets complicated, especially not knowing someone, if that makes sense. So if I know someone, if I've been someone's teammate, I'm just going to avoid it because that's sort of against the code. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I don't know that person and I'm asked to, and I certainly have to I have to talk about certain people. I think sort of viewing that through what happened to me, it's like, all right, I've got to be sort of delicate. And sometimes like even I'll gather information. You know, I'll talk to people around the league. Hey, what's this guy actually really like?
Yeah.
Like, what's this locker room? What's sort of dividing this locker room? I'm not going to like quote somebody on that, but it's information gathering.
Yeah. Well, so last week we had Chuck on the show and he was telling me the story about how he said something about Michael Jordan on air. They haven't talked for 10 years because of it. That was his best friend. He is saying it's been something that's been very, very difficult for him. How do you toe that line? And have there been times where you've had to talk about somebody that you're close to, but it's made you a little hesitant because of how they would receive it?
Yeah, I think there's been 2 times that I wish I had handled differently. The first one was with Zion last year when CJ McCollum had given an interview at All-Star break and they asked him about what him and Zion had talked about. And CJ said, I haven't spoken with Zion, which I thought was strange. CJ had played 5 games with the Pelicans at that point. And again, I think I called him I can't remember the exact wording, but as a teammate, I said, you know, he kind of distances himself or whatever, which is something that I said to Zion when I was his teammate. It wasn't like this the first day, but I wasn't like just saying it publicly. But I wish I'd handled that differently, and I probably could have just avoided it altogether if I really wanted to. And then there was something else recently, you know, just talking about a team, and I probably got some information wrong. And one of the players reached out to me, and we had a nice chat about it, and that was that. So I think that's the challenge. Perk and I have talked about this, and Perk I think spoke on this when he came on my podcast. Like it is hard, and I will readily admit, like I am so pro player that it borders on bias. I will admit that, and I'm pro this generation of player. I will admit that. But it's formed by my own experience of playing against these guys. I'm not an historian of the NBA, but I certainly study the NBA. I spent like weeks last summer watching like old 1960s finals games on YouTube and 80s finals games on YouTube. I'm like, am I crazy for thinking this about today's player? Let me go back.
Yeah, let me see. Are they plumbers? I'm just kidding.
But I'm so. But you're often asked to talk. And presented with a situation, especially on First Take, where it's not just about did this player shoot the ball well, or is this player causing this team to lose? You're asked to talk about things that can often be very personal, and that's a challenge. And I promise you that as long as I'm doing this, I go into everything with the right intention.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fuck up. Like I know I am. Like nobody has batted 1,000 in media.
Yeah,
there's not a person.
For sure, not one human being. But I wonder too how sustainable you feel like that is, because I think that is one of your powers is that you are pro player. People feel comfortable talking to you because they know that you understand. But for how long can you be that?
it's something that I can get frustrated with sometimes because we do live in a world where clicks matter and people respond to incentives. And so if the incentive is a click, most people, I'm not saying everyone, but most people at some point are going to respond to that incentive, meaning they're going to say things or do things for clicks. I don't go on First Take. I don't do a podcast with the intent of clicks. Certainly, I want positive feedback. We all do.
Yeah.
But I go into the intent with trying to be as authentic as I can possibly be, and that can sometimes drive one group of people to feel a certain way and another group of people to feel a different way.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the game. I've accepted it. It's all good.
Yeah.
You know, so in terms of how sustainable it is to be a pro player, like I think the fans, I think people who are commenting on Twitter or watching First Take and disagreeing with things, I think they are so biased at times.
Yeah. They're set in whatever they think.
That they're so set. So nothing I'm going to say is going to change their mind.
Yeah.
It's, in some ways, I'm not comparing the two, but in some ways it is like politics, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Where
no, for sure.
It is,
yeah.
you know, the people that are sitting there, oh, great take today.
Yeah.
It's because you already believed what I just said.
Yeah.
And the people who said you're an idiot, that's because you think something else completely different. There's nothing I can say.
No one's mind is changing in those 3 minutes.
No.
Yeah, I totally agree. Have you ever had something go viral from your podcast that you're like, damn, I feel bad that went viral? I've had plenty. But I wonder if you're like, that is not what I wanted this to be about. And then you feel bad for the player because they said it on your thing. It's like, it's a whole thing.
I'll be honest with you. I can think of one example, and I gave him every out. I'll be honest with you. There are times, and it's not often, but we've done 137 episodes on The Old Man and the Three. I've made 5 or 6 edits without telling the guest I was going to make these edits because I felt like I had to protect them a little bit.
Really?
So I just don't put it in. We had one player early on give an interview. The juiciest part of the interview was a story that nobody knows. It's fucking hilarious, but it put him in a tough position. And so his team reached out. Can you cut the story? We cut the story. Now with Perk, this motherfucker said he was praying for LeBron James to tear his ACL.
Crazy.
And I was like, Perk, we're going to cut that. And no, you're not going to cut it. You're not going to cut it. They need to understand how crazy LeBron was making me, you know? So I was like, all right, we'll leave it in. We'll leave it in.
Really, that's interesting, making that decision to cut it for them.
Yeah. It somewhat has to do with my own experience as a player. So if it's not additive, like honestly, when the player asked us to cut the story, it was the best part of the entire interview. I honored it, and we very well easily could have put it in there. We could have kept it in there. But I felt like that was an additive thing to the story. So if it's not additive and it's just going to cause a fan base or a group of people to be pissed off, like I don't need to do that.
Yeah. No, and that's fair. I think that makes sense. Did you ever think, you would be sitting down to do interviews and the first 15 minutes would be about you as a media member and not about JJ Redick, sharpshooter? Even, when I YouTube JJ Redick, it's not basketball highlights that come up. It's just your podcast.
I know my oldest is very confused by that.
Yeah. He's like, are you sure you played basketball,
Knox,
Dad?
you got to be very specific when you type in my name, because he loves, he's on YouTube every day. So I'm like, when you're very specific, when you type in my name, you have to add the word highlights. Otherwise, it's just going to be the podcast or First Take.
Okay, so if highlights came up, right? What is the highlight you would want people to see of JJ Redick, the basketball player?
The easy answer, the one that comes up the most, so the Duke Instagram accounts are not necessarily the official ones, but just like Duke fan accounts, Duke Twitter accounts or whatever, the Texas game comes up a lot. And I don't know how many views that has on YouTube. But that's one. But I'm really proud of my Duke career. Don't get me wrong. I'm so proud of it. I'm more proud of my NBA career.
Yeah.
because I understand now that I'm on the other side how ridiculous it was that I got to play 15 years in the NBA. And I just, somebody was asking me this the other day, outside of winning a championship and being an all-star, and I only needed those things once. I didn't need them 9 times. Outside of those 2 things, like, I did way more than I ever expected in the NBA. So NBA, it's not my 40-point game against Houston, which was my career high.
But we'll make sure we say that.
I think it's probably like a random game in Charlotte or something where I had like 27, 10, and 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're like, I could.
No, because I'm like, and I don't know if that was the game in Charlotte where I had a little lefty reverse layup, but there was a little bit of sauce. It didn't come out much, and it wasn't highly seasoned, but I had a little sauce.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about doing, all these things in the NBA that you probably never really thought your career would be. And in 2005, you did an interview with, I think, the Charlotte Observer, and they're talking about what you want your career to look like. And you say, oh, well, I'm just going to be a role player. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if most NBA players or NBA prospective players mm-hmm. would be able to say, okay, I don't think I'm going to be a star. Because that's the thing that you hope to be. Mm-hmm. How did you have kind of, I guess, that presence of mind to know this is what you thought would happen?
Some of it is because I try to be realistic.
Yeah.
And some of it was coach. Something he always talked about was Broadway shows. I know that sounds weird, but he said, if you go to a Broadway show, let's say you go once and you're like, oh my God, that show is amazing. If you went a second time and you really thought, what makes that show amazing? Maybe it's the lead, and maybe it's their voice and their singing and the lyrics, right? But what makes a great show, what makes a great team, what makes a great product is everyone starring in their role. So go to a Broadway show and watch the person that doesn't have any speaking parts, who's dancing in the third row of the ensemble. Mm-hmm. Like, they're totally invested in that scene. And he talked about that with our own team. Like, your role may change year to year, but if you're starring in that role, you have value. And so even with my son, every NBA fan, it's like, if you're not a top 5 player, you're a bum. It's a very weird phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And so Knox will ask me about, is this player good? And I'm like, yeah, he's good. He's in the NBA. And he's like, well, how good? And I'm like, I don't know, Knox. And he's like, was he an all-star? And I literally have this conversation with him 7 times a week. Knox, there's all-stars and there's all NBA guys. And then there's like 70 players that in the right moment with the right fit could be an all-star. Mm-hmm. There's that many good players. So yes, Knox, Mikal Bridges is good.
How do you think we got here, though, where that's how we discussed what a player was?
People like lists.
Yeah.
We like lists and everything. Yeah. What are the best restaurants in New York, Taylor? You're going to give me a list.
Yeah.
Who are the best players? You're going to give me a list. People like lists. People like, it's like a Michelin star. It's like, are we sure that restaurant's good? It doesn't have a Michelin star. It only got 7.2 at the Infatuation. It's like,
Peter says no.
But this is how human beings operate. And so it's like, if I go on a basketball reference page and I don't see all NBA, all-star multiple times, like, well, that guy wasn't that good. And that's not true. I mean, I think about different guys. Somebody said the other day, somebody asked on Twitter the other day, something about which player would you want to see in today's NBA? And I said Peja. Like, Peja is like an overlooked OG legend to me. I think he was so awesome.
Answer, I would not.
Yeah, but he would kill. He would kill in today's NBA. Not that he didn't kill in his own career, but so yeah, we think because a guy, and this goes back to ring culture too, which is a very complicated thing. Did you watch, by any chance? Did you watch Hasan Minhaj's episode with me that we did? He had this.
We all did too, right?
We did. This is the one we did with Brad. It was the Bradley Beal episode 2 months ago. But
no, I think I watched the first.
Yes. Yeah. So the most recent one, he had this really insightful, I think profound take on winning and how we view winning, and the cost of winning, and sort of the maniacal approach that you have to take to win and be a champion. And we applaud that. I'm not saying it shouldn't be applauded, but there are different forms of winning.
Yeah.
And he used Steve Kerr as an example. And Steve Kerr's obviously won championships. But when you talk about his relationships with his family, his lifestyle, the respect that people have for him, like that guy's won. He called him the ultimate winner from those Chicago Bulls teams. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, and I agree.
Dame has talked about this a ton
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell me Damian Lillard is not a fucking winner.
Totally.
And yes, he doesn't have a ring, but I would say that guy's a champion.
Yeah.
He's a champion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has so much respect of everyone in the league. Everybody likes Dame. He's one of the best teammates. He's kind. He has a beautiful family. I think that is fair and makes a lot of sense. But when I think about how we view these players, I actually do sort of think about your career because you were drafted 11th overall, right? But those first 3 years of your career, I think it's fair to say it was a bit of a struggle. But then now we see you as one of the most prolific shooters of all time. And I say that to say, I wonder if we don't give players now enough time to become who they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because say you came, 5 years later, there's a good chance you're not JJ Redick.
I think if I come 5 years later, I'm probably have a better career.
But I mean, you had to get there. Like in that
Yeah.
situation, you had to get there though.
Yeah.
Because they weren't even playing.
The other interesting thing, I got lucky in this sense because I was not a good NBA player my first 2 years, and I didn't shoot well my third year. But at that time, like I felt confident that I was a rotation level player. I was 22 when I was drafted. Like it wasn't like I was 19, and so the Magic were really patient with me. I worked. I figured out how to sort of fit on that team and play a role on that team that Stan valued. It was a great learning experience, but we don't give enough time for judgment calls.
Like
I
patience
think
is not a thing that exists in the
we're
NBA,
also I'm guilty of this as well. I think we all want players to like make that jump, that leap, the proverbial jump from role player to star or star to superstar. And sometimes it just takes time. And Jayson Tatum is a great example. Like him not making All NBA his fourth year, and that whole I remember the discourse around that. And the Celtics struggled that year. I think they ended up with a 7 seed, maybe something like that. But they were around 500. And Jayson, counting numbers wise, had a good year, but it was like that he was a disappointment almost.
Right.
He had a disappointing season, and then comes back, makes first team All NBA, top 5 in NBA voting. Now is 2 years after that is, I think the clear front runner right now for MVP. And so sometimes that leap just takes time. Sometimes players maybe never going to become a star, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of examples of players that were drafted very high that never made the jump to star, but are now in their Jeff Green. He's in his like 16th year or whatever it is now. He's carved out a great career.
Yeah.
He's won. He's won.
Yes, and I think that it's placing too much of that weight on the actual literal winning being a trophy. And it makes us really, sometimes I don't like the way that we do talk about players because I don't think that patience exists. I think that we expect players to be who we think they were supposed to be, and we aren't giving them time to like fill in those gaps. And it's very dangerous for players, right? Because it affects their self-esteem, but it also changes the way that we value life and people, because everything is just like a commodity that has either like it's about to expire or it still tastes good. And there's like no in between of those things.
Yeah. I'll give you an in between of that. And actually I went on Pablo Torre from ESPN Daily. He's him. He's an awesome dude.
Pablo's great.
But we did a podcast on sort of mental health versus mental toughness. And I think the sort of in between is just kind of acknowledging that some players just aren't built a certain way mentally, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean they're less of a human or player. It's just they're missing it. And it's like some guys just, they're never going to get it. And that's okay. That's okay. But I think the criticism of that is what we signed up for. So yes, I don't want to be dehumanized as an athlete. I don't want to dehumanize other athletes. But the criticism and the critique, it's part of the job. It's why we get paid, because there's millions of people that watch us and critique us and talk about us and want to join the discourse, and it's part of it. And you just kind of have to accept that.
Yeah. Would you say the majority of guys in the NBA actually do not handle criticism well? Because I would say that.
Here's my question. Who does, this is where I'm like, who does handle criticism?
No, I disagree. I think that when there is something constructive being said, I will take that. And I know you will too. I'm talking about, I think that a lot of guys don't like hearing that they're not the best. That type of criticism.
Yeah. Not that you haven't been criticized publicly, Taylor, but I think the constant public criticism can weigh on you a little bit. So I think that's an element of it. I also think that there's this weird, I'm going to knock players here, and there's this weird, like, the haters, right? It's like, I want to prove the haters wrong, or I have so many haters, and you're just like, dude, LeBron is arguably, okay, let's just say he's top 2 player of all time. Let's just say that, okay?
Okay.
He's top 2 player of all time. Let's say that. Actually, we'll just say, I don't want to offend anybody. We're going to say he's on the Mount Rushmore of NBA players. He's top 4, all right? At the least, he's top 4. LeBron James has as many, if not more, haters than any NBA player to ever exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
It's like, this is the, and truthfully, there are people driving that, public people in media that are driving that a little bit, but it's just part of the last 20 years, especially, I think, and specifically the last 13 to 14 years with social media. It's what we do, and it's what we signed up for. It's fine.
Yes, and I am agreeing with you, but I think that not everybody views it in that way. I think that some athletes take criticism that isn't like rough. It's just not them being the best, and they take it incredibly personally. There's been so many times that like someone has reached out about like a thing that I said, even if it wasn't bad. Like I didn't say anything rude or disrespectful. Who knows? Maybe I'll write it in my book one day. But I didn't say anything rude or disrespectful. I just didn't say that they were this specific thing, and they take that to heart.
The superstar thing.
Here we go. I'm not saying who or what we're talking about. I'm not saying who or what we're talking about. But that is the thing, and I just wonder. It's
because you like lists. It's because you like lists, and it's like because you like to categorize things.
I was actually asked about that.
Here's a question.
So shout out to Jayson.
Here's a question, though. I know. Here's a question, though. I'm going to put myself in a players
it was
in
not
a player's.
I want to be clear about that.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Yeah, in a player's position, like, what do I value? So, I think it's human nature for you to be valued or to be categorized in a certain way and to value that. So, if something like an all-star and how important that is. I think Rudy Gobert, when he first got named an all-star, he cried, right? It was that important to him.
When he didn't get named.
When he didn't, no, when he didn't.
He cried when he wasn't
Maybe he cried
going
both
to be
times.
an all-star. I don't think he cried the second one, but the first time
there are
when
players that have cried when they
he
got
wasn't named and he was
That's
upset,
right. That's
and
right.
that's when he cried.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was clearly important to him, as it should be.
Yeah.
Right. It's you want to be recognized, and it's important. But I think placing too much value on those categories or those lists, I don't think that's necessarily a healthy way to live. I know, going back to Duke, like, it seems small now. I was the leading scorer on the ACC championship team, and my conference numbers were better, and I was the 6th leading vote getter for all conference that year. So I was on the 2nd team. And like, I was fucking pissed.
Yeah.
I was pissed. Had I made first team, my season was still shitty.
Yeah.
Like, it was still a shitty season.
Yeah, it didn't really matter in the grand. Yeah.
So it's just it's a small example, but I think, and Coach used to, I remember even going into that year, we met before every season, and going into that year, I like brought this piece of paper, and it was like first team All-American, ACC Player of the Year. It was like all these, win a championship, you know, all the goals I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And he's like, let me ask you a question. Have you done anything noteworthy this offseason to actually achieve these goals? And I left so dejected.
Because you're like, no, I haven't.
Now, the following year, I was 215, 220-ish when my season ended. My sophomore year, I go into preseason at 192. I've won every conditioning drill. I'm killing in every single pickup game because I had worked on my game all summer. And I go in there and I didn't even have any goals. I was just like, I'm just going to go and I'm going to play. But like, you can't say that about me this year.
Right.
You'll never say that about me ever again, that I didn't do the work to achieve something. So yeah, I mean, I think the category part and the list part, I think that matters. But how much value are you placing on that? That's why we get sensitive. That's why we get sensitive.
Fair. And hey,
Yeah.
I'm sensitive at times. I think everyone has the right to feel what they want to feel.
Skin, Taylor. I'm fucking sensitive as shit sometimes. Catch
And
me in the
that's
wrong
fair.
moment.
That's fair. I just am like, I don't want. I think what a big part of it is I don't want anyone to ever feel bad about something I said. Like that genuinely is a big part of it because a lot of your job is your opinion. It's asking questions, having discussion, and it's never coming from a malicious place. At least for me, I'm not going to speak for every media member, but so I'm always thinking like I don't want somebody to feel as though their like worth is being questioned because I said something. Because in the grand scheme of it, who am I? Who cares really?
But I in the last year since I've become part of the media, I've been accused of like protecting a player. Like I don't think players should be protected. Like if a criticism is fair and it's just, then criticize and say it. Taking your agenda out on someone is a very different thing.
Definitely.
It's a very different thing. And we talk about bias in media. And like, again, I am biased because of my experience. We are all biased to a degree because of our experience, or in some cases, our knowledge, right? If we don't have all the information, we may inherently be a little biased.
Yeah, for sure. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your NBA career, a criticism you heard of yourself that stuck with you?
The defense thing, for sure. I mean, because I was never going to rebound. I'm not a good defensive rebounder, so I was never going to rebound. And I because of Stan specifically and our schemes there, like I never was going to gamble on defense. And so I didn't get a lot of deflections or steals, and I didn't defensive rebound well, but like I was a good defender for a number of years, but like RPM wouldn't rate me well because I didn't get deflections. I have short arms, right? Defense thing. Now, at the end of my career, please hide me.
I can't do anything on this.
I told my first year in New Orleans, like I called this team meeting, and like it was just kind of, we had lost a number of games in a row. And I think we lost like double-digit games in a row, and this was like halfway through the streak. But I like called this meeting, and I'm like, all right, guys, like we're going to talk this out as a team. We're going to be real with each other. We're going to be honest with each other. And so like I said a few things to guys, and I'm like, yeah, my defense sucks. And I'm like, guys, I can't do it anymore. I'm admitting to you, like I can't go lock up Devin Booker. Not that I ever could, but please hide me.
Like do not. It's a mismatch. Don't put me on Devin Booker.
So that's one thing. The other part about being a shooter, a great shooter, and not just me. I mean, it's every guy. People look at that so much, and they don't value all the other things you do. And I never was a high volume pick and roll guy. I think my last half of my career, I was always in the 90th percentile in pick and rolls. Like, never got any credit for that. Not that I wanted it.
But I did a little bit.
I was never going to be a primary playmaker, but I was a damn good pocket passer. I'll be honest with you. If I had the right two-man game, Joel, Zion, Blake. So like you're again, I'm never going to get credit for any of that stuff. It's fine. I'll be a shooter who couldn't play defense, and I'm like, okay, yeah, but I played 15 years, so I must have been doing other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so 15 seasons in the NBA. Which season were you the happiest?
There's it's weird because the seasons that stand out, a lot of it has to do with the group.
Yeah.
And not necessarily something that I did.
That's fine.
And it also a little bit has to do with the point in your life you're at. So I think about 2010 a lot, and we had made the finals in 2009. That was a magical year, and it was awesome. But like personally for me, it was very meaningful because it was the first year I didn't get any DNP CDs. I played in every game that year, and I knew I was going to be in the rotation every night. And so that was like, and we won 59 games. We made it to the conference finals. My first time being a teammate with Matt Barnes. Jay Will was there. White Chocolate. So like, it was just an awesome year. Got engaged, got married that year over the course of that year. So like that year means a lot. Mm-hmm. Those first 2 years with the Clippers, even though I didn't have a great year my first year, I played 35 games. I broke my wrist, tore a ligament in my wrist. I had a herniated disc in my back that caused nerve damage in my leg. We ended up shitting on the bed against OKC in the second round. So like there's a lot of things that went wrong that year, but it was my first year with those guys. I like became Chris Paul's friend that year. You know, I became DJ's friend that year. That was an amazing year. Knox was born that year. The following year was awesome. That was, you know, one of my best personal seasons, and it obviously ended poorly, but like our group those 2 years was so tight. It was great. And then my first year in Philly, because that was leaving LA, new situation. Brett empowered me so much to lead that group. And again, I got to play with Joe. I got to play with Ben. I got to play in Philly. It was magical. We had a 16-game winning streak. So those are the 4 seasons that stand out the most. But I enjoyed all of it. Like you have to understand, like I would get stressed out. You know, if you're going through a shooting slump, if you're on a losing streak, I did play on a couple bad teams. You know, I was in the playoffs a lot of times. Like I was on bad teams a couple times, and like it's very stressful. I was never ungrateful. I enjoyed every day of work, even when it was hard and even when it was stressful. I loved it all. I really did. Maybe not the first 2 years.
Not in Orlando.
The rest of it.
That Clippers team is so fascinating to me because there were so many personalities. I mean, you talk about having to manage people. Yeah. I can't even imagine that one. And so you talk about Chris Paul. I know this is someone you've discussed at length. I know Chris. I think Chris is great. He's super kind. He's been nothing but good to me. But people hate Chris Paul. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they've ever really spoken to somebody who knows Chris Paul well. Mm-hmm. So what is it that you would say about Chris Paul and why you think he tends to be misunderstood?
Yeah. We hated each other in college. We both talked about that openly before. So that's...
To each other, about each other, in different articles. But so I'm saying, when you get on the team together, are you like, okay, we got to talk about how we really fucking hate each other because we have to get past it?
So he re-signed, and then few other guys re-signed. Darren Collison signed a 1-year deal, and then I signed a 4-year deal. So we had this press conference, and it was really the first time that we sort of had talked. We had, I think, texted during free agency, but it was like so brief. It wasn't a real conversation. So we talked there, and like I was kind of like, I don't know how this is going to go. Like, is he going to be an asshole to me? Like he's been an asshole to me my entire existence of knowing him. And we both had got invited to Brandon Bass's wedding. Mm-hmm. That summer. So Brandon was my teammate in Orlando originally, then again with the Clippers later on. But so we go to Houston, and I like saw him walking in the hotel. We were sitting, you know, I think we were in the restaurant or whatever. So I texted him. I was like, "Are you at Brandon's wedding?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Come down when you're ready." Chelsea and I are just waiting to go. So he came down, and we chatted for like 2 hours, and it was like, "Oh, I'm gonna really like this guy. I'm gonna really like this guy." In some ways, we are wired the same way. I'm not throwing elbows into Jose Alvarado's chin. I'm not that type of guy.
Bad angle there.
I'm not nut punching Julius Hodge. I'm not doing that, but it's all love, CP.
It is all love, CP. But yeah, that's a bad angle on that video.
Chris and I, we could yell at each other. This is what I love. We could yell at each other. We could disagree with each other on the court. Mm-hmm. And then we could go get dinner after the game. It was never personal because I understood that he just wanted to win, and he understood that I just wanted to win.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we got along really well and became very close friends.
But when did you know, like, okay, we're friends? Like, not just we sat in this lobby for 2 hours
Scandal.
and we spoke.
Scandal.
The television show?
Yeah.
You bonded over a scandal.
Him and Jada would invite Chelsea and I over every week to watch Scandal. And we'd go and we'd sit in his theater room, we'd pour a glass of wine and we'd watch Scandal.
That is hilarious.
For like weeks and weeks and weeks. Yeah. That was when I knew. Like,
yes,
we're friends.
watching Olivia Pope
Yes,
is what
exactly.
bonded JJ Redick and Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Wow, what were you, Team Fitz? Like, where did you stand on that? And where did Chris stand?
Oh my God, you're asking such specific questions about. So much has happened in my life since that show was popular.
Good show.
I
though.
can't even remember the third season plot, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. It was a good show. It was highly entertaining.
It was a good show, but then it kind of started to get a bit too crazy,
Yeah.
and I was like, this isn't realistic.
Most shows go off. the
Yeah,
rails
like
at
would
some
this
point.
happen? Okay, biggest regret, or what do you regret more? Getting LeBron's ankles and missing the shot, or even thinking that you could stop LeBron and it ended up in you bleeding?
Definitely the ankle breaker.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a career highlight moment lost.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not a highlight.
It's not. I hate
highlight.
when you guys are probably guilty of this at Bleacher Report, and I'm sorry, but I hate when Instagram and Twitter accounts show ankle breakers or a crazy pass
You gotta
and the
make
shot
it.
doesme go in.
You got to make it.
It drives me insane.
Yeah.
I'm actually very proud of that charge because not many people would stand in the way of
would do
LeBron
that.
James on a fast break and just take it. So yeah, I know I've talked about this before, but like it drives me crazy because Knox and Kai, my youngest, they give me shit for
Yeah.
missing that shot against LeBron.
Do you have a moment against LeBron that you are very proud of? Not the charge.
There was a game in Philly during our big win streak. So this was 18. That was the team that he sort of took to the finals. They obviously lost to Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and the Warriors. But during that streak, we played in Philly and like we were our motion offense and cutting. And I had a big first half and we were up like 30 and he brought them all the way back. And then I hit 2 big shots down the stretch. So that was a good moment.
You can hold that close.
Yeah, it was a
Okay,
good
good.
moment.
A couple more for you before we close out. I do want to read this quote to you because I thought it was really beautiful. You said, "I want to be really great at something. I want to win. I don't know how you win in media, but I'll figure it out." What have you figured out?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, Taylor, if I'm being honest, there's, and it's only because I had this conversation with a friend of mine who lives in the Bay Area, and I called the Warriors game 2.5 weeks ago. So we had dinner the night before, and we were talking about the competitive side of sport and how it's hard to find that same competition in media. And I've reflected a lot on our conversation over the last 2 weeks. And when you are an athlete and you get to the highest level of your sport, it's one of the reasons I can't watch college sports anymore. It's very hard for me to do.
bad.
I'll watch the NFL, I'll watch baseball,
Bad.
whatever. But I'm like, when you get to the highest level of your sport and you get to compete in that, and you certainly lose, you certainly win, you have good nights, you have bad nights, all of it is a drug. It's a drug. The high you get from winning a playoff game on the road or hitting a big shot down the stretch to close a team out and getting back to the locker room, it's a drug. I haven't found anything that hits the same.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever will. And I don't know if any athlete ever will. I don't. And there's certainly ways to... I find incredible fulfillment from being more present with my kids and with my wife and now our puppy. I find incredible fulfillment from that. But the fulfillment of competition that I got to experience as an NBA player, maybe I just have to accept like it won't ever happen for me in that same way. Because that drug hits, man.
Yeah.
It really does.
When I was talking to Chuck on the show and he talked about when you stopped playing basketball, he said that it was traumatizing. Is that the word that you would use?
I wouldn't use that word. Again, my current mental health coach and therapist that I have been talking to for the better part of 3 years, he really helped me through retirement. And I got to a great place with it. There are times, actually I had it this week in Dallas. I don't know if I was such a meaningless player at that point that it wasn't even a big deal, but we had a game Saturday, Sunday, and home games. This was during the year where I was away from my family, so I saw my family 3 times in 8 months, and prior to that had missed 2 months with them in the bubble. So my family came in for the weekend, and Rick knew that. So Rick called me after shoot around and said, "Hey, I don't think we're going to put you in the rotation tonight in the first game, but I plan on putting you in the rotation tomorrow night because it's the second night of a back-to-back. We'll probably have a couple guys sit out. Know your family's here. Don't want you to feel embarrassed. You're more than welcome to just go to dinner with them instead. I know you miss them," which was an incredible thing to do, and I thanked him profusely. So I went to dinner with them. It was at Ocean Prime, very close to my apartment, which also has to be close to the hotel where all the teams stay. So I was calling the Dallas game over the weekend, and I walked from my hotel up to where the teams stay, and I walked past the Ocean Prime, and I started crying, because I remembered that moment and how humiliating it was. Not that Rick humiliated me, but just that feeling like as a competitive athlete of like, there's nothing I can do to help my team win tonight. It's like, I'm that. And there's been different points over the last year and change since I've retired that, yeah, those moments hit you, and it's not trauma. It's just, I think Chuck was the same way. I think most athletes that have long careers are. You put so much, you invest so much. It's not just time and physical exertion. It is literally all of your emotions, all of your mental capacity into something, and then it's just gone. Yeah, you're going to have moments where you're like, shit, man, that sucked. Or shit, that was awesome. Wish I could get that again.
But I think that's such a good point, because there is the time that you announce you're retiring, but then there's the time that you know you're going to retire. And those are not the same time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And your time might have been that might have been when you were like, I actually had that thought this weekend, because I'm looking back, I'm like, how did I not know right then and there? Like, I should have retired the next day. I should have just been like, I'm good. But yeah, it's like those times aren't the same. But it's like
delusional. But
it takes you.
I knew going into the last year, because retirement, to be truthful, like as soon as we started having kids and I started missing time, and as they started getting older, I'm like, all right, I want to keep playing. And even my 14th year, I had a great season for the Pelicans. And my last game of the bubble, I had 31, trying to stave off elimination from the play-in thing. So it's like I just, in some of it was physically my injuries. Like I just dropped off a cliff, but my spirit was broken that last year. And I can remember the moment. And I had gone in that year being like, I think this is my last year. And I told David Griffin that is one of the reasons I was like, New Orleans knows it's my favorite city, literally in the country, and my favorite place I've ever lived. But I was like, I need to be home. I'm not, my son is starting kindergarten. It's time for my family to have some sort of priority. And we go to Tampa first to play the Raptors in the opening game of the season. And I had a great game. I had 23 points, hits 2 big threes. Actually, I had 4 threes in the fourth quarter, but 2 big threes down the stretch, including an and one from the corner. And I'm like jazzed. I'm like picking up right where I left off from the bubble. And we go to Miami next. Christmas Eve is off. We have the early game at 12 p.m. I wake up that morning. My wife has sent me a video of Kai, my youngest, running downstairs to the Christmas tree. And I broke. And that was it. And I never ever had any desire after that. I'm not good enough to halfway through it. My spirit was gone. And I mean, I talked to my parents on New Year's. I thought about driving back from New Orleans. Like it was just so. Yeah, it like that part of it. That part of it, I've had to sort of reflect on, and there's a sense of like guilt because I'm like, man, I fucking let my teammates down that year, and I have a built-in excuse because I had an Achilles injury, but I was dog shit for like a month after that. Like I think if you looked up my stats the next 7 games, I was 1 for 6 on average. I shot 7 for 42 over a 7-game stretch. At no point in my career did I ever. I mean, I had some bad stretches, but like 7 for 42 over 7 games. That's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Well, I mean, going off that, I do kind of want to give a final thought on someone that I know is a dear friend of both of ours is Sue Bird, because I think that the way she retired was perfect. And she did it like on her terms when it felt right to her in her way. She had her moment with the fans. Yeah. And I'm like, she was so lucky and also so intentional and so smart to be able to have that ride that she was able to have in the end. Does that make sense?
100%. And part of that, if we're being honest, is because Sue's a legend.
Yeah, totally.
And
she is.
There are plenty of examples of this in different sports, but certainly I can think of a few off the top of my head in the NBA where the legends get to retire on their own terms, and maybe they weren't the player that they were 5 years prior or in their prime, but they get to do it on their own terms. Most of us have to figure it out, and it's a very confusing process.
Yeah.
I think Sue, because I'm friends with Sue as well, and so like we talked about this going into not only her last year but the year prior. Yeah. And I got the sense then, and I get the sense now, like some of it is for athletes, some of it is that identity and that drug that I talked about. Like and Sue has so much other shit. Think about this. Sue has so much other shit going on. Mm-hmm. She could have been 5 years into her post-playing career already and be killing it at a bunch of different things.
Yeah. There's
something that is so addicting about competing and playing a team sport and trying to win. It's hard to give up.
Yeah.
It's hard to give up.
That's why when people will talk shit about like Melo or IT or people, they're like, okay, you need to retire. I get feeling they need to retire, but I also get why they can't.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I think it's a whole thing, but I think basketball fans are very lucky and very happy that even though you have retired, your voice is still in it. And we get to still pick your brain and hear all your thoughts. And you genuinely are an elite communicator.
Oh, thank you.
So I think that we're all very blessed to have you in the media space, sir, and to have you on my show. So thank you so much for stopping by.
This has been fun. I appreciate it.
Bye, JJ.